everything you need to know about the Mueller sentencing memos. All the Cohen, Manafort, and all the Comey news in just moments. But we'll also plan on getting to some other stories later tonight. Hollywood A-lister Kevin Hart withdraws from hosting the Oscars over gay remarks that he made a decade ago. So is the PC culture killing entertainment and comedy? Raymond Arroyo will be here and show us more of the, well, more repulsive toys of the season and Friday Follies. Everyone needs a little laugh tonight. And plus, how weed is taking over every part of America. We began in talking about the big push for legalized medical marijuana and how that somehow morphed into pot being delivered right to your front door on command. And later in the show, I'm going to take on the lefty lawmaker pushing for this new delivery service. But first, this is a Fox News alert. All right, tonight, Bob Mueller's special counsel team and the Southern District of New York have delivered 3 court filings involving that we're going to tell you everything you need to know tonight about all of these filings, shedding light on the Mueller case and the sort of risk this could pose to the president. There's so much hyperbolic reporting surrounding these releases. I wanted to go straight to our panel. Let's get right to it. Former U.S. Attorney Joe diGenova, David Katz, former Assistant U.S. Attorney, and Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor, and President Trump's 2016 campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, a man who overlapped with Paul Manafort on Trump's team. Joe diGenova, to watch the reaction on the other networks tonight, you might as well have thought that Donald Trump just came out in like a hammer and sickle T-shirt and said, look, I'm actually a Russian operative myself. But what did we actually discover? Let's start with the Cohen filing. Again, the recommendation for his sentencing, which is coming up next week.
What we learned was that there's no evidence, again, of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and certainly nothing with the president personally. We learned that Michael Cohen is a kind of a rather unscrupulous individual who sought to enrich himself through the campaign and did some pretty sleazy deals after the campaign. But in fact, there is no suggestion whatsoever that the president did anything wrong, committed any crimes, or certainly had any contact with Russians. A lot of hype, a lot of sound, a lot of noise, a lot of drama, but no substance in terms of the president of the United States.
Now, some have jumped on this part of the special counsel's filing on Michael Cohen without including the last part. We're going to just read it to the end, and you can make your own conclusions as to why some media organizations are leaving it off. Quote, the defendant also provided information about attempts by other Russian nationals to reach the campaign. For example, in or around November 2015, Cohen received the contact information for and spoke with a Russian national who claimed to be a trusted person in the Russian Federation who could offer the campaign political synergy and synergy on a government level. Cohen, however, did not follow up on this invitation. Byron York, that's just one of the small little pieces of information about Russia that is being seized upon by people like, I think, Maggie Haberman and others. Russia's here, Russia's here. Nothing happened with that.
Nothing happened with that, and it also didn't happen with several other contacts or alleged contacts between Russians and members of the campaign. We don't know who this Russian national was. We don't know what was going on. Clearly, Michael Cohen wasn't very interested. He was still interested in a Trump Tower Moscow thing. I will tell you, though, I think what's going to come out of what has happened today is a pivot from talking about Russia to talking about campaign finance violations. I think that's in the Michael Cohen stuff, and that's where you're going to get.
We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. David, I want to go to you because this is the kind of hyperbolic, over-the-top commentary we heard just about that one Russian contact that was never followed up on. Let's watch.
Synergy is...
synergy sounds a little collusion-y.
I think it's a Harvard Business School term for collusion.
Right, yes. It's a Hollywood term for collusion.
Right. But this goes back to why this is, I mean, this is politically very damaging for the president. I think that we need...
You think this actually could, stick?
I think this could stick, yeah.
David, collusion-y. Now the New York Times is coming up with new adjectives. Love it.
Well, there is something called conspiracy. And of course, the inquiry is always whether Cohen or Trump transition officials were in league with Russian operatives. Now, that has to be proven yet. But I think...
No, David, yeah, hold on a second. If that call happened, and we assume it did, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you don't think Russia or China or Saudi Arabia is trying to get into contact with all these campaign officials? You bet they are. Always are trying to reach out and make contact. If a call was made in 2015 in November, there's no crime there. What's the crime?
Well, there is a law which prohibits foreign contacts, and all of these campaigns are very well aware of what the legal ramifications are.
What law are you talking about?
That a presidential candidate and also as a presidential candidate cannot accept help from foreign governments. And so if there was help from a foreign government...
There was no help from a foreign government. There was an offer by an individual who claimed that he was trusted, who was basically swatted away by Michael Cohen.
Well, supposedly...
Big deal.
Supposedly Cohen continued...
Cohen, not Cohen. Gary Cohen's a different person.
Supposedly Michael Cohen continued with those negotiations regarding the Trump Tower. And there's going to be all of this inquiry into the Trump Tower. That's what they're interested in with Michael Cohen. And when Michael Cohen gets sentenced in a week, even if it is 3 or 4 years, there's going to be a Rule 35 down the road, Laura. You know that, where he'll get another chance to help. And, of course, that's very troubling.
He was described as not a cooperating witness. The Southern District of New York basically kicked him to the curb. The special counsel's office said he was more helpful, but that's not on what you're talking about. That's not the part you're talking about. I want to go to Corey on this. Corey, heard this time and again. Collusion, collusion, collusion. They're trying to affect the election. I have no doubt that there are a lot of countries that were trying to affect our election. No doubt in my mind. And I'd love to know more about what China was trying to do to affect our election. But how is this, and I keep going back to the same thing, how is this Russian collusion?
Laura, what people forget is Barack Obama was the president of the United States. His intelligence community was tasked with making sure that no outside entity interfered with the outcome of our election. No one talked about it. Donald Trump was a private citizen. He had nothing to do with the integrity of the ballot process or the integrity of how the election was going to be administered. That all fell under the Obama administration, the Comeys, the Clappers, the Brennans of the world. There was no collusion. There was no cooperation. There was no coordination between anybody on the Trump campaign.
The word conspiracy was thrown all around. In major American newspapers tonight, the word conspiracy is used over and over and over again. Conspiracy with the Russians. Conspiracy with the Russians.
Michael Cohen had nothing to do with the campaign. He wasn't a campaign employee. He didn't have a campaign email address. He wasn't compensated by the campaign. He was a Trump Organization employee, of which literally he was 20 floors apart from where the campaign was. He had no operational authority whatsoever for the campaign. He couldn't make decisions on behalf of the campaign.
I think we should note that Mueller has not charged anybody, not Cohen, not Manafort, not Flynn, not Papadopoulos, not Gates. Nobody has been charged with taking part in a criminal conspiracy to influence the 2016 election.
The Washington Examiner, Byron, your newspaper, Eddie Scari's piece tonight, Michael Cohen lied about dealing with Russia, but Trump didn't. I think we have an interesting full screen. I want to read this to Geneva. There's a simmering media narrative that this would prove Trump has also lied about his dealings, given his repeated claim throughout the campaign and into his presidency that he has no deals with Russia. But even the liberal Slate publication in late November said, in the strictest sense, none of these denials appear to represent a lie as far as we know, because of Trump's adherence to present tense verbs. I have no dealings with Russia. I don't do deals. I have no loans with Russia. But these statements serve to mislead people about Trump's attempted deal with Russia and Cohen's past contacts with the Russian government. Maybe there's more to learn in the special counsel's investigation, and maybe there's not. But if Trump's ties to Russia amount to a business deal that fell flat, in which he was not forthcoming about, liberals and Trump opponents should brace themselves for another round of those pangs of disappointment. Oh, that was a really good piece, Joe. Again, the Russian collusion or the word conspiracy, when I see the word conspiracy out there today, the journalists who know better, it's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting, because they either don't know the law or they're purposely ignoring it.
I think it's very important to underscore what Byron just said. Not a single charge in any of the crimes that Mueller has brought involve a conspiracy by anybody in the Trump campaign or Trump himself to deal with Russians, Russian governmental officials, Russian business people, Russian political people, Russian comedians, Russian grocery store keepers, nothing involving a criminal conspiracy. In fact, all of the allusions to Michael Cohen's attempts to get at Michael Cohen by Russians are simply described as things that happen. They are not described as parts of a crime. So the notion that there was some sort of conspiracy described in today's multiple pleadings is false reporting of the worst kind. It is hopeful reporting, it is anticipatory reporting, but it is not actual reporting.
All right, Alan Dershowitz has weighed in tonight as well. He was on with Tucker earlier. David, I want you to react to this. Let's watch.
The report will set out a circumstantial case based on all the lying that's taking place, a circumstantial case for arguably political sins. But I don't see any crimes. Collusion itself is not a crime. Using information given by Russia to WikiLeaks would not be a crime unless the campaign participated with WikiLeaks in the hacking itself. And there's no evidence to support that.
David, where is the crime?
Well, that was
the Russia crime.
That was one of the things that Mueller was trying to find out from Manafort. I think one of the reasons why Mueller says Manafort is in breach is because he thought there were two things that Manafort knew about and wasn't telling the truth about, consistent with Mueller's other evidence. One of them was whether Manafort had these contacts with WikiLeaks, with Trump intermediaries, or with Russian intermediaries. That was the allegation. The other one is the Trump Tower meeting in New York City, the one in 2016 with Kushner and Donald Trump Jr. That's what Mueller thinks Manafort knows more about than Manafort's telling. That's why he says he's in breach, Laura.
Right, I understand that. But Rudy Giuliani came out and said...
That's not in any of the pleadings. That is not in any of the pleadings.
It's not in the pleadings.
What David just said is not anywhere in anything that was pleaded today.
Well, you can say that it's speculation, but you wonder, why is Mueller saying that there's a breach? There's a long under seal pleading that was filed today. There's also a lot of redacted pleadings that were filed today regarding Manafort. So you wonder, what is Mueller saying the breach is all about? Stay tuned. That's what I think you're going to hear in court.
It does appear that Mueller is still angry at Manafort for all the lies he told about his business dealings in Ukraine.
Going back to 2000.
This whole Konstantin Kilimnik, 2004, 2006, this whole Konstantin Kilimnik stuff. It had to do with making all that money over there and not reporting it for U.S. taxation.
12 million bucks. And Kilimnik was a one-time Russian intel guy, but you say there's no such thing as a one-time. Once you're in, you're always in. So again, when the New York Times says, well, and then there was Manafort not telling the truth about this Russian-Ukrainian guy. Okay, that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Nothing to do with collusion, nothing to do with Donald Trump. And maybe Paul Manafort should go into prison for a long time. But this has zero to do with Russia trying to interfere with this election, working with Donald Trump to do it. Zero.
Laura, Paul's crimes that he's both been convicted of and pled guilty to preceded his tenure at the Trump campaign by a decade. And what we've seen now is that the Mueller investigators are taking those crimes and sending them
into this current narrative.
The Southern District of New York for prosecution because they have no jurisdiction here. The Mueller team is not here to look at crimes that were committed 10 years prior to the Trump campaign.
I got a question. Why did Trump hire Manafort?
Look, it's a great question.
Why the heck did he try to hire Manafort?
Because at the time...
He was the gold standard.
He was a delegate hunter.
In the 80s.
He was still doing things on the fax machine, which was the way to do it in the 1980s. And you have to remember, when Paul Manafort came to the campaign, it's when Ted Cruz was winning delegates even though he was losing states, and they were concerned about a floor fight. And Paul was the last guy.
And you weren't enough to handle it over
That's what they say. That's what they say. I didn't believe him then. I don't believe him now.
I was like, I didn't get the Manafort. It's like, this is like a total time warp going back. Remember Byron in the 80s? Manafort, Stone, and Atwater. Manafort.
70s.
70s. Going back a long way.
Manafort and Stone may end up back together soon. Who knows?
Yeah, no. Okay, let's, Joe, I want to touch on this issue of the campaign finance issue, because I think that's the toughest here for the president, and clearly the one that's going to give him the most angina overnight. Because Michael Cohen, and it's laid out in the pleading today, Michael Cohen does say, or the prosecutors say, as he confessed to in August, allegedly that Trump directed the payments to the National Enquirer and to Stormy Daniels, $150,000 and $130,000 respectively, with the coordination and direction of individual number one. That's what the pleading says. You kind of see it there. Now, that's a violation of the campaign finance laws. That's the allegation. And you look at the statute, can't use a company to make donations to a campaign. They slipped it through that LLC, can't do it. What are your thoughts on that tonight?
Well, according to the former chairman of the Federal Election Commission, that was not a violation of the federal campaign finance laws. Now, the use of a corporation would be, but you'd have to prove that Donald Trump knew that the corporation was being used to do it. It was not illegal for Donald Trump to allow his personal funds to be used to pay hush money. Paying hush money is not illegal. The question is, was it done to further the campaign, or was it done to prevent personal embarrassment and to keep it quiet? That is actually makes it impossible to prove a crime, because either one of those scenarios is possible, and therefore a jury would have to guess at that. Not only that, there's no evidence that the President of the United States ordered that it be paid through a corporation, which is what would make it illegal. The payment itself would be perfectly proper. So
well, if it's disclosed, you're saying it's proper even if it's not disclosed?
In which the president has any exposure.
So, Joe, you're saying it's proper even if it's not disclosed. If it's meant, and this is what Cohen pled to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was meant to influence
it only has to be disclosed if it is a personal campaign contribution by the president. If it is paid to keep the women silent, it is not a person because he doesn't want to embarrass his family.
That's where they're different.
That is not a campaign contribution.
It's a POV of the Trump team versus what Cohen's trying to say to try to get less jail time. I mean, that's what they're going to say. Look, he wants to get less jail time, so he's got to do something. He's got to foist some of the blame over to Trump because he's got to parry down the jail time there. But, David, this is what some of the commentators today were concluding on the campaign finance aspect. Let's watch.
The big news tonight is not about Michael Cohen. It's not about Paul Manafort. It's about one person, Donald Trump. For the first time, you have federal prosecutors essentially saying that Donald Trump committed a felony.
That this is the first time that federal prosecutors are accusing the president of the United States of having directed a crime.
What they say is Michael Cohen's 2 campaign finance felonies were directed by a person named as individual 1. That person is Donald Trump. That means that Donald Trump also committed 2 felonies.
No.
David, 2 felonies? Is that what the statute says?
Well, I think that Joe has a pretty thin reed for the president to hang his hat on. I think if there really was an intention, and if that money was paid, and if anything that Michael Cohen says ends up being true, that's a huge problem. And there's also, as you, I think, suggested, there's a failure to disclose. There's a reporting violation. Now, Senator Edwards was prosecuted. He was acquitted. But he was prosecuted by the Obama Justice Department, as you'll recall, for you could argue personal. There were 2 different inferences. Yes, he was found not guilty, but certainly the president's dream is not to go to a jury trial and be found not guilty.
But it is
he would want to head this off long before that, and I don't think that argument really works.
It's why we're all going to be looking at that Edwards case, because the Justice Department in that case really kind of leaned forward on that too far. And if the president can make the argument that this was a payment to avoid personal embarrassment, and frankly, Donald Trump could say, I've been paying off women for years, long before I ever started running for president. This actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, this is what the New York Times leads with in their main coverage of this today. Prosecutors say Trump directed illegal payments during campaign. So involving 2 women, McDougal and Stormy Daniels, $150,000, $130,000, one payment made to buy the rights to Karen McDougal's story from American media, and the other a direct payment. And you know what I go back to, and this is just a question that's somewhat related here, but why hire Michael Cohen? I mean, again, I don't know Michael Cohen. I've talked to him like once or twice, but why is Michael Cohen working at all for Donald Trump? I mean, why is he in a position of any authority? I don't get that.
He was Trump's fix-it guy for over 10 years.
Well, he didn't do a very good job fixing things. He didn't do a good. And look, to Byron's point, if there is a pattern here of the Trump organization making payments to entities or individuals over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years, and no one knows that, then this is a nothing, and this is Michael Cohen trying to plead out to something that he either has a history of doing in the past, or we know has transpired in the past, and we'll find out if that's the case. But this is Michael trying to save himself because it looks like he's going to go to jail for north of 4 years.
Let me just read something, Byron. I'll get you in a second. This is in the Southern District's filing today, and it just sums up the kind of guy Michael Cohen is. And like, we're in Washington, and there are a lot of sleazy people in D.C., okay? But this is kind of amazing. Cohen, an attorney and a businessman, committed 4 distinct federal crimes over a period of several years. He was motivated to do so by personal greed and repeatedly used his power and influence for deceptive ends. The crimes committed by Cohen were more serious than his submission allows and were marked by a pattern of deception that permeated his professional life and was evidently hidden from the friends and family members who wrote on his behalf. Now, this is all going to be one-sided because it's all coming from the prosecutor, and I'm an old defense attorney, so I'm very wary of you prosecutors. But you've got to rely on him to make the case against the president. Yeah. And Joe DeGenova, you rely on a snake like Michael Cohen. It happens. It happens in mob cases. You rely on criminals to give up the goods on, on John Gotti.
Well, first of all, they're not going to be making a case against the President of the United States, no matter what their evidence is, because the Justice Department has ruled that you cannot indict a sitting president. They ruled twice on that, once in a Democratic administration under Bill Clinton and once in the Nixon administration. But it's very important to realize what the prosecutors said in those pleadings. They said that Michael Cohen violated the law and that he was, according to them, was instructed by, number one, the candidate to make the payments. They didn't say that the candidate told him to make illegal payments. They were very careful not to say that the candidate instructed him to violate the law. It's a very, very important part of the pleading. They have not alleged that the President of the United States violated the law. They've alleged that Michael Cohen did.
Yeah, well, again, I think the president not being charged is different from what the Democrats are hoping for, perhaps, is for the president to be dealt with in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Let's watch.
And they can do that.
Where is this going to go? It's going to go, it seems to me, with the president being indicted, or at least up to that point, and it's going to go to Congress taking on a very serious and very, very appropriate investigation, and you might call it the opening days of an impeachment.
I think what this totality of today's filings show that the House is going to have little choice the way this is going other than to start impeachment proceedings.
I think that a lot of Democrats will tell you that as of today, they now already have enough to go forward with that. When Michael Cohen pleaded, he said he had made these payoffs at the president's direction, but that was just Michael Cohen saying that. Now they're going to say you have federal prosecutors saying the president committed 2 felonies.
The weight of the Justice Department.
There you go. And that is going to be enough. And so I think there's going to be a serious number of Democrats, they're still a month away from being sworn in, a serious number of Democrats who say the case has already been made.
Corey.
Look, Michael has no credibility. We're now seeing that he made $4 million from corporations who wanted access to Donald Trump and said Michael didn't deliver anything. You know, he's a serial liar. We know he lied to Congress. He's now pled guilty to that crime. He was lying to the investigators, and he wanted to save himself. So if the Democrats think they're going to move on impeachment on the President of the United States on the word of Michael Cohen, they will see the repercussions of that at the ballot box in 2020.
You know, Michael Cohen is the lawyer that Trump chose for 10 years to represent him, just as Manafort was the campaign chairman that he chose. I mean, this is...
They're two bad choices.
This is a lot of Trump's own making, and I think that we have to be realistic.
It doesn't mean he's committed a crime. Having bad judgment in whom you hire, we've all hired people we regret, believe me.
But they're going to say a lot of things, Laura, and they're going to be corroborated. This didn't get this far without them having corroboration records, tapes. One of the people we haven't heard about is the National Enquirer head. If you believe that Mueller is smart enough, this is not his first rodeo, to put in clues and not put in clues, how about the things that aren't in there? How about the fact that there's no discussion of this fellow at the National Enquirer?
What about him, David Peck? What about him?
Probably because he's working with the investigators. And there's other people who it appears have been left out or minimized or kept in the redacted or under seal portions who are probably working and providing a lot of corroboration to the investigation. So I think we have to be realistic.
I got to say, I'm not seeing that. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not seeing it so far. I'm really not. And Joe DeGenova,
let me tell you something.
We could sit here all night and speculate about this.
The one person who's worrying tonight is Tony Podesta, and the other person is Gregory Craig. because that's where the cooperation has been. And they're finally looking at a Democrat. And it is Tony Podesta's failure to file as a foreign agent and Gregory Craig's failure to file as a foreign agent. That's what they're looking at. That's what much of this is about the unsealed portions.
John Roberts, Joe, has, our own John Roberts has reported that in fact that was part of what was in those redacted portions referencing those two.
Right.
Jonathan Turley spoke out earlier today about what the special counsel now is going to be trying to do anew with Michael Cohen. Let's watch.
It's clear with Cohen that this is not the end for Cohen. They're dangling out what's called a 5K 1.1 letter, which is basically a cooperation letter. And they come back repeatedly and say, you don't have that letter. And so what they're doing is essentially turning this into a canned hunt. They're going to hit him with a sentence. The only way he's out of that cage is if he tells them what they want to hear. But that actually is concerning to me, because here's a guy who's obviously cooperating fully. They say he's credible. So what else did they want him to say?
David, I got to get on this, because this is why people, really dislike certain prosecutors. He has given information. He's been interviewed 7 times by the special counsel, I think at least. And do you hear what he said there? They're trying to get him to what they want him to say. Paul Manafort's been sitting in solitary confinement. The most hardened criminals in the United States aren't in solitary confinement. They put that man in solitary confinement. He's only out 2 hours a day because he hasn't given them what they want him to say about Trump. I find this to be appalling. And everyone watching this show right now should realize U.S. prosecutors do this every day to people. They do it, not the solitary confinement as much, but they turn these screws on individuals, a lot of people who don't have as much money as these individuals to fight it. But they do this every day because people are petrified. They don't want to spend the rest of their life rotting in jail. And it's a tool and it's a tactic, and sometimes it's for good, I understand. But in this case, especially with this Manafort deal, I find it repulsive what they've done with him.
Well, I'm a federal criminal defense attorney right now, and I think one of the great things for your viewers that this Trump incident, whatever you want to call it, these 2 years of Trump, have shown the nation is that our federal criminal laws are in great need of reform. And this idea that they're going to squeeze Michael Cohen, maybe he'll tell them the truth, but the fear is maybe he won't. And they're obviously going to give him another shot. After his sentencing to 3 or 4 years, they're going to get what they call a Rule 35, which is a way that the federal prosecutors say to a judge, you know what, he's cooperated with us since his sentencing. Now you should give him a big reduction. And what an impeachment of a witness that now he's facing 3 or 4 years, probably getting a stay of surrender during that. And now he grasps out, provides some information. And how do you judge the credibility of that as probably not credible? He better have corroboration.
I'm going to say again, and very interesting, where's the Russian collusion?
The thing to remember about Cohen and Manafort are special cases because they are the ones who committed big personal crimes in their businesses. They were both basically convicted of evading taxes in large sums. That's what they're going to get the big jail time for.
They all get the mob for tax evasion. You get them for tax evasion, wire fraud, 1001 statements, etc.
A false statement. We have one guy who's gotten 30 days, another guy who's gotten 14 days.
And we have Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills who got nothing. They got immunity deals.
We have Andy McCabe, who's been lying to the FBI since he was the acting director and hasn't been prosecuted yet. Look, I'm no fan of Paul Manafort, let's be clear. He's being treated worse than El Chapo, who's on trial in New York for being the running the biggest syndicate in the world, right? Look, they've done this to Paul because they want to go after the president because they have a political agenda. Bob Mueller and James Comey go back 25 years together, and it's political in nature, and we deserve better from the Justice Department.
Well, Manafort was found to have obstructed justice while he was out on bail. You have to remember
that's solitary confinement.
That's not right. But the fact that he was detained is not really outrageous if he was trying to tamper with witnesses while he was out on bail, Laura.
Let me tell you what's really outrageous.
Solitary confinement?
That I don't agree with.
That's
that I don't agree with at all.
That should be sanctionable. I would sanction the push for solitary confinement. I find it, I don't even have words for it. Who gets solitary confinement anymore?
It's been an appalling display of bad supervision by federal judges as well, who are permitting this. We shouldn't let them off the hook.
Right.
But let's remember, There's no Russian collusion that's been proven. And what really matters is how this investigation got started, what was the role of Brennan and Clapper and Comey and Sally Yates. And when we have a new attorney general, who I hope will be Bill Barr, a superb nominee, one of the first things he should do is appoint a special counsel, if Mr. Huber hasn't completed his work, to investigate the genesis of all of this, where no crimes were committed by anybody in the Trump campaign involving Russian collusion, and yet somehow the intelligence community of the United States was used as a weapon of federal law enforcement. It's one of the most disgraceful performances. If anybody cares about freedom, ought to care about that in spades.
All right, we got to get to Comey, because Comey came out. He testified on Capitol Hill today behind closed doors. The transcript's coming out tomorrow, right, Byron? So we'll know tomorrow what was said. Apparently his lawyers were pulling him back from answering lots of questions. Big shock. But I want to get your thoughts on what he said. We have a number of sound bites, guys. I want to make sure we go through them in the right order before we get to the Attorney General. He also spoke about what he perceives to be this ongoing series of attacks from Trump on the Justice Department. I think we have it. Let's watch. We're getting it. It should be coming any moment. Everyone ready for Christmas? It's coming. What do you want in your stocking? Joe, you get coal all the way. Here we go.
Thanks.
I think the president's attacks on the Justice Department broadly and the FBI are something that no matter what political party you're in, you should find deeply troubling and continue to speak out about, not become numb to attacks on the rule of law.
Well, the President of the United States is speaking out for the rule of law as well, David. He's speaking out for the idea that when you file for surveillance on an American citizen, you reveal that the research provided was actually ginned up and funded by the individual campaign's political opponent, Hillary Clinton. That was not given to the FISA court. Well, one of many abuses that James Comey and company were responsible for.
Laura, we should not be so ready to attack federal judges. Federal judges and their independence and their unbiasedness, that is a great jewel in our system. And federal judges, I think, have acquitted themselves very well in this case, including the FISA judges. Well, you're claiming that the FISA judges...
Well, first of all, FISA judges have been unhappy. One at least has been very unhappy.
They had things to go from, and the FISA court, I think, has done a good job in this, and I think that the federal judges in general have done a great job.
David, let's talk about it. A lot of people listening aren't lawyers. If someone was coming after you, they wanted to get you, and the research that they were using was funded by someone who was your mortal enemy, sworn enemy, in business or law, and that wasn't told to the judge, do you think you'd be a little upset? I think all of us at this table would be a little upset because it's tainted evidence, or at least has to be really looked at with a grain of salt.
Well, you've never had a guest who believed more in the exclusionary rule than I do.
Well, you don't sound like it. What happened to you?
I'm a criminal defense attorney, and absolutely, if there is really tainted evidence, it shouldn't be used. It shouldn't be the fruit of a poisonous
phony dossier.
But I don't quite buy that here, Laura. I'll be honest with you, I don't quite buy it here.
Laura, here's what they did. The FBI leaked classified information. They sole sourced it to reporters. They took those reporters' stories and they used them as verification in their second FISA application.
Feedback
because the first FISA application, unlike 98% of them, was actually denied. And the judge stepped off the bench and called the second FISA judge and said, am I reading this correctly? They're looking to spy on an American citizen for political purposes. And the first application was denied by the Justice Department.
All right, I want to get your thoughts now on this comment from Comey after, again, his House hearing today about Trump's pick for the next Attorney General. It likely raised some eyebrows in Trump world today.
I like and respect Bill Barr. I know he's an institutionalist who cares deeply about the integrity of the Justice Department, so I'm sure he'll use the standard career resources he has to judge what he should be involved in and what he shouldn't be involved in. But Bill Barr is a talented person who was a good Attorney General the first time. I liked him very much then. I think he'll serve the Justice Department well.
Joe, what do you think the president's feeling listening to Comey praising Barr tonight? Trump's like, wait a second, get Chris Christie on the line. What's going on there?
Well,
I'm just teasing.
Well, Comey is doing Comey's doing what he usually does. He uses sanctimony as a weapon. In his particular case, it's very unbecoming. Let's remember, James Comey is a disgraced, fired FBI director because he violated the law. He violated the chain of command inside the Justice Department. I really don't care what James Comey thinks about anything. And I sincerely hope that when the new Attorney General takes over, one of the first things they do is get a draft indictment of James Comey for leaking classified information, leaking information to the New York Times, leaving third parties to leak information. I think his performance as both a director and as a former director is a disgrace. And let me just tell you, from my conversations with people inside that building now, they are embarrassed by Comey and everything that he's done since he was fired and before he was fired.
And I just want everyone to know, I never want to say that I'm like, I'm a great institutionalist.
One last thing. The behavior of the Justice Department in this whole investigation, Capitol Hill trying to find out what's going on, they have slow-walked and stonewalled every step of the way.
And I wonder why they slow-walked. You all were fantastic. Thank you for being with us on a very busy Friday night. We have to have some fun now, right? Raymond Arroyo is next. You will not believe it. Oh, it's Friday, so it's not just Cohen, Manafort, blah. It's time for Friday Follies. And today's topics, Kevin Hart bowing out of the Oscars, a classic Disney song nixed at an Ivy League university, and some of the second installment of the grossest toys of the Christmas season. Joining us now, all the details, Raymond Arroyo, Fox News contributor, New York Times bestselling author of the Will Wilder series. All right, Raymond, comedian Kevin Hart was all set to host the Academy Awards, and he's a funny guy. What happened there?
Laura, the Academy wanted, and ABC wanted, just what they did in the case of Roseanne Barr, a larger-than-life, edgy act that would draw a big audience. But when controversy followed, they ran for the exits. Let's go back to 2010. This is a bit of Kevin Hart's act. So you see what ABC knew they were getting into. Watch.
One of my biggest fears is my son growing up and being gay. If I can prevent my son from being gay, I will. Every kid has a gay moment, okay? Every kid. But when it happens, you gotta nip it in the bud. You gotta stop it right there. Hey, stop! That's gay! It's quick. No!
Now, Hart also wrote similar tweets, and over the years, ABC and the Academy had to know this. Now, they fired a director, remember, a few years back for making an anti-gay slur on Twitter, and you will remember why they probably hired Hart. He's a beloved African-American performer in this age of Oscars so white, and because of what he said at the MTV Video Music Awards, Laura, earlier this year. You'll remember he sided with the NFL kneelers, and he told the president, quote, Trump, suck it. Well, lovely. The Academy loved the Trump-bashing, edgy, crass Hart until Hollywood and the community started pushing back on social media, calling him homophobic, anti-gay, and they reached out to Hart. Watch.
Just got a call from the Academy, and that call basically said, Kevin, apologize for your tweets of old, or we're going to have to move on and find another host. Talking about the tweets from 2009, 2010. I chose to pass. I passed on the apology. The reason why I passed is because I've addressed this several times.
He decided not to apologize. He said, I'm not